Hi, it is me again. Where I am going to talk to you about total position funds. And I'm going to try to do it in the very best, most explanatory way that I possibly can. Um, okay, a couple little notes just for revisions. Um, we're going to talk about total position funds. I'm going to walk through some of the math again for you, especially if you don't bill salary, you've never billed salary before. In fact, I think if you do bill salary, you probably don't even need this training because it's literally figuring out salary billing. But for those of you who have never billed salary before, um, I want to make sure that you feel comfortable and you're confident moving forward, that you have everything you need from us to be able to do this. It is a new ask from us. It's not an option. We are moving everybody towards this. You won't be able to bill any other way or do an amendment any other way. So we do need you to be able to do this. So I'm hoping to be able to help um, you confidently be able to do that. So in the last training, I did mention the match waiver. If you want to take match out of your budget, please do that now in your revisions. And I did talk in the last training about some of the amendment restrictions. Since it is sort of a change, well, not sort of, it is a change. Since it is a change and it's not quite very good news, I wanted to mention it more than once. So it's just in your mind. Don't move. You won't be after revisions are over, like after revisions are 100% complete and your grant is up and running. When you go to do an amendment, you will not be able to move money from one category to another. So if you want to move money from one category to the other, revisions is the time to do that. And then also, all of the RFP guidelines, restrictions even, are still applicable. This training should be attached to an email, and that email should also have the RFP instructions attached. I highly recommend you pull out the RFP again and just scan through some of those guidelines and things like that. There were some restrictions, the up to $1,000 for grant funded travel and training. Those things still have to be adhered to. Any of the guidelines, if you add personnel to your budget and it's a brand new person and you've never added them in an amendment before, make sure you're attaching a resume. If you're adding a new training that, maybe VOCA's never seen before, make sure you're attaching training agendas and stuff like that so we can make sure that everything's still VOCA allowable. So, okay, total position funds we struggled a bit on what to call this because we didn't want to quite call it salary because it's not salary. We know that many of you are not salary. Many of you are hourly, and you are still going to use your hours and your wage to find this total position fund percentage. Some of the reasons that we are doing this are because, sorry, I distracted myself. Okay. Some of the reasons that we are moving to this total position funds is that we are hoping that it is going to be a lot easier for you and for us during amendments and billing and moving around within your budget. So what is happening when we do amendments is when we're adding, say, Mary, we have Mary working a position and we want to add Frank because Mary left. We have to add a line for Frank, And then let's say later on in the year, Frank gets a raise. We have to add another line in the budget. So for one position, we now have 3 lines in the budget. Sometimes we have even more because maybe Mary got a raise too, right? So 4 lines in the budget for one position is crazy. And so we have been working on this for a while. We needed to make sure that it was allowable and stuff like that, and that there weren't any audit issues. Um, but we're hoping that you guys will be able to incorporate all of the changes, all of the increases or things that are happening for that position within that position. So, for example, we're going to be looking at the housing coordinator position in a minute, and that will make more sense. What I just said. Mariah is also planning on moving towards this method as well. She will let you know when it is time for VAWA for VAWA and SASP to move towards this. So I'm going to try to just say grant funded instead of VOCA or VAWA. You are still documenting and tracking your grant worked time and hours. If you are salary, you should have already been doing that as well. Everybody should be tracking their grant worked time. You should be able to show the auditors that. If for some reason one of us, grant analysts, asks you for that information, you should be able to show us the time you are spent working on your grant funded position. VOCA funds positions and not people. So sometimes this is an interesting concept that people don't realize. When VOCA funds this housing coordinator, the data intake specialist, the outreach case manager, when they fund victim advocates and things like that, VOCA is funding that position. VOCA is funding it at these dollar amounts. So the housing coordinator position is funded at $34,935.68. All right. I think I said everything about that I wanted to say. Maybe just a little bit I'll add to, so VOCA funds this $34,935.68 for that position. That's all the grant is going to cover for that position. In most cases. There's some outlying weirdo cases, but we're going to talk about like just normal, regular cases. Okay. So we are going to talk about the housing coordinator position. So we figured out, not me, I didn't write the grant, but the grant writer, when she figured out how they got to $34,935, they got to that number using 1976 grant hours at $17.68 an hour. So that is all still important. $34,935.68 is all that the grant's going to pay for this, whether employee A works it all year or employee B gets added onto the position. I said that already. Oh, good, it's in writing right here. No more separating hours for different people working the same position, and no more multiple lines for the same person with hourly wage rate increases. There is one more good thing that I cannot remember now about why we decided to do this, and for the life of me, I'm kicking myself that I'm in a training recording and I can't remember what it is and I didn't write it down. What a ding dong I am. Oh, a ding dong sounds good right now. Anyway, we have grants. It's so crazy. We have grants that have like 5, 6, 7 people on them, but the budget is like 42, 43, 45 lines, right? So it's just insane. We're hoping this is going to be easier for everybody. Everybody. It keeps wanting me to tell it that I want to stay in the call. Yes, I want to stay in the meeting. I'm here by myself. Yes, I want to stay in a meeting. Okay. Okay, let's get to the math and get it over with. So, if the grant is paying 100% of the position, easy peasy. If you have a 2080 employee and they're 2080 and all they do is VOCA allowable stuff, easy peasy, you're lucky. There's not many of you. So if you're a 2080 100%er, awesome, yay for you. If you are one of the rest of us who do not have full-time, full grant-funded people on your grant and you have to figure this out, that's why we're here. You can see in the little example, housing coordinator, 100%, agent salary, 100% easy. Okay, so when we figure the budget, we're going to use the same math to actually do the billings. And I want to address the billings right now because I don't want you at billing time to get confused, because there are going to be a different percentage, and I will show you how to figure that out. But I want you to be aware that the method is the same, but the percents are not going to be the same. There has been a lot of trauma and drama in the past few years over why is the percent in my application or on my approved budget, why is that percent different than what I'm actually billing? And, why am I getting audit findings? Which, oh, by the way, reminds me, this is the same method that the auditors probably have been working with you if you got an audit finding for fringe benefits. This is the same math. This is the same method. It's the same idea. You can only bill your grant for the amount of time worked. So this is how we figure this out. Oh, that's the other point. Oh, thank goodness, brain, you remembered. So another benefit to billing it this way is your fringe and your personnel, the way you figure all of that stuff is going to match. At least the method is going to match. So we're hoping that you recognize this and it feels easy because essentially you have been, or you should have been doing this to figure out your fringe benefits. Okay. The math. Yay for math. And I realize you guys are advocates, you're case managers, you're lawyers and stuff like that. Math, you chose the profession you chose, so you didn't have to do math, but we have to do math a little bit. Okay, so in this example, the position is paid 40 grand. We know that this position is not fully funded by VOCA. Oh, it is VOCA, but it's not fully grant funded. The grant is paying $34,935.68. This is the math on how I came up with that percentage. This is the math for the budget, the revision budget. So I am doing agency. Ooh, I better back up. I am doing grant funded, which we already have that number. We already know that your grant funded employee or your grant funded position is funded $34,935.68. So grant funded divided by total agency. So grant divided by agency. Remember, grant divided by agency. So that's how the percentage comes about. And you may have heard me talk about, if you watched the last training, please tell me you watched the last training. Please, for the love of all that's all that green and good, you watched the last training. If you watched the last training, you'll know that I went out 4 decimal points to get to exactly $34,935.68. It's okay to go out 4 decimal points. I haven't had to go out more than 4 decimal points to get to where I need. But if you see something crazy like that happen, it's okay to go out more. We want you to spend your money. We want you to spend that last dollar. It's okay. It's okay. Anyway, the ledger will do the math for you. So if you put in total agency salary and the grant salary, let's see, I think I have that backwards. If you put in total agency salary and the percent, then your number will come up for you. That's how it's doing the math. So you have to be able to know your total agency salary, and you have to know the percentage. So that's why it's important for me to be explaining how we find those percentages. And again, if you've never done it this way, you're not used to doing it this way, I don't want you to feel bad if you feel like you're confused and overwhelmed. Many people, including myself, never build this way when we're grant managers, right? So we find the percentage, and that's this math. And we have to know the total agency salary or the total agency worked. Okay. Last slide, I promise, but a lot of words. Billing payment requests. So you're going to see the math here is the same. The idea is the same. Grant worked versus total agency. Grant divided by agency, right? So billing each month or quarter, the math is the same. We're going to divide the total grant worked hours or worked paid divided by the total agency worked hours. So in this example, let's say quarter one is next July. Employee A, who is the housing coordinator, works 480 hours agency total. And only 460 of those hours are grant work time. So that means that this employee has a timesheet or time cards that say that they worked 480 hours total, but they have 20 hours that were either VOCA allowable or VOWA allowable. So they have 20 hours that are grant allowable, and they have 460 hours that are grant, that were worked on the grant. Okay, so now we have to figure out, when we're billing, we have to figure out the total amount that the agency paid, which you can do this using pay stubs. You can add up the pay stubs. You don't necessarily have to do this math right here, but it is important to kind of understand how the math is happening, because this is what the auditors look at. They look at and make sure that these amounts aren't more than what you're actually making. And they make sure that your hours that you're asking your grant to reimburse aren't actually more than you actually worked. So anyway, this is just the math behind it. So 480 hours, total agency hours, times the wage, which was $17.68, equals $8,486.40. We're going to pretend that there's no taxes in this world, but taxes would apply here. So we're not even going to mess with that, because I don't have an equation for taxes, because taxes is different for everybody, and sometimes it's different every time, right? So let's pretend that this is just the number. This is the total that the agency paid, 480 hours, quarter one, July through September. So then we know that this employee worked because we need two numbers, right? We need two different numbers. We need to know the grant number and the agency number. So we've got the agency number now. Let's get the grant number. 460 is the hours that this person worked on the grant. 460 times their rate came up with 81.32. So we need to find the percent, right? Because our ledger is going to ask us for the percent that's grant funded. Because we know the agency's total agency salary, we know how much they paid. And sometimes the budget or the ledger might say salary. Again, we know you're not salary. We're trying to call it total position funds. We're trying to change it, but it's a little hard when there are still some people that are salary. So if I say salary, then you're hourly. Just know that I actually mean for you, total position funds. Okay, we know the total agency salary now. We figured that out up here. We added it up from the paychecks, from the pay stubs or whatever. So now we're finding this total. Grant worked divided by agency paid. So 81.3280 is grant worked. That's the math right here. and I just backspaced and didn't mean to. Grant worked divided by total agency paid gives us 95. So this is where this percent is different than your approved budget percent. So this is why when you're confused in the past and say, how come I can't just bill? How come I can't just bill this 87.34%? That doesn't even make sense. So let me tell you why it doesn't make sense. So when you bill only 87.34%, sometimes you're underbilling, right? Because sometimes you have quarters that your advocates or your case managers or your attorneys or your detectives or whoever your grant is funding work 560 hours in a quarter. So if you only bill 87 and you actually could have billed 95%, you're underbilling. But the other problem as well is what happens if you go to bill 87% and you actually had a person that didn't work 80%, 87%. And so now you've accidentally overbilled, which was a lot of our audit findings 2 years ago, right? So that's why these percentages are different, but please just remember that the math is the same. So don't use this budget amount or don't rely on it or don't expect to rely on this percentage because for most of you, if not all of you, it's going to be different when you go to bill in a quarter or in a month because there's just not a guarantee that your employees are going to work the same amount of hours or work all of the hours. So I'm hoping that makes sense. So again, this is the same math that hopefully you can see me circling the bottom here that your fringe benefits is based off of. So some agencies have gotten audit findings because they billed too much fringe, and they billed too much fringe because not all of those fringe benefits were tied to a grant dollar. And I have another training about that went out, I think last quarter. We can always resend that to you. I try to keep the grant trainings half an hour or so. But anyway, I hope that this helps when you start getting confused and in 3 months when you go to bill. I'm hoping that this makes sense and you can reference back to it. And just remember, the math is the same for how you build your budget. The math is the same for how you actually bill each quarter or each month. So anyway, we hit a lot of stuff in these 2 last trainings during revisions. If you need help, please ask questions to the Q&A. Please email your grant analyst. If your grant analyst needs you to put the question on the Q&A, please put the question on the Q&A. So everybody can see it. It is anonymous. It ends up being anonymous. So if you feel, embarrassed, please don't feel embarrassed, but I won't tell you how to feel. But if you feel embarrassed, just know it's anonymous and you can just totally pretend that that's not you asking that question, but you can be getting that answer, right? So, but I guarantee, I've said this before, I'll say it again. If you have this question, so do 15 other people. So please ask your questions to the Q&A. Please ask your grant analyst. That's why we're here. We're here to help you through this. We're here to help so that you don't get errors, so that you don't have audit findings. We're also here to help you, make sure all the money gets spent and your program plan gets executed the way that it's supposed to. We know VOCA is rough. We know VAWA is rough, but we want to help make this as easy as possible for you guys, and just, as easy as it can, because it's rough, because you guys already do a really hard job. And so anyway, let us know if you have questions, if you need more resources. We're putting those together and we're trying to get them out to you. So Anyway, I'm going to leave you with that, and let us know if you have questions. We'll see you later.